Rather fittingly, perhaps, I'd like to begin with a story. There was once a little girl growing up in a quiet country village in England. What this little girl loved most of all was to read. One of her favourite books was called Children Just Like Me. It was a big, beautiful book, and you had to lay it across your lap to read it. And it gave her many stories for what a child's life could be. She learned about how some children grew up living in hammocks and hunting with arrows in the jungle, how others lived in big round homes called yurts, how some children wore silk and others wore fur, how some lived in big cities full of millions of people and how others lived high in the mountains. The book was filled with photographs of the children, their most treasured possessions and the places they lived. What captured her imagination most was that they were real, that they were going to school, playing, sleeping on the other side of the world. They were indeed just like her. These stories stirred her imagination and opened new worlds for her. Perhaps you have guessed by now that that little girl was me. Since then, the world has changed. More than ever before in the history of modern civilization, everyday people are empowered with the tools to be the generators of content and with the technology to instantly share this with a global audience. Distribution has undergone a radical transformation, and storytelling has been democratized. At any given moment, thousands of micro-stories are unfolding around us on Facebook, on Twitter, and in hundreds of other niche social spaces. Digital storytelling on the fly has become an extension of what we all do. Smartphones record and integrate into the flow of our everyday lives, networking our streams of stories with the cloud and with each other. For millennia, telling stories has been a part of what makes us human, part of who we are and how we understand ourselves. When we read a dry, factual argument, our intellectual guard is up. And yet tell us a story and we are drawn in. We interpret what we learn with emotion, and somehow we are left impressionable and vulnerable. Storytelling has always been part of our natural state. Our new technology simply amplifies this. New forms of narrative expression are constantly emerging, and a diverse array of online platforms have sprung up, fostering community engagement and collaborative storytelling. The stories we tell today aren't standalone pieces of content, but network narratives that link to thousands of other stories and resources. Some of these resources, like Twitter, even allow us to connect with the author, while others tell us where and when the stories took place, giving us the context of time and location. The digital age has produced the storytelling age, and it's gathering momentum. Think back to the story I told at the beginning of this talk. Though I was perhaps too young to articulate it at the time, or to understand its significance, that particular book taught me an incredibly valuable lesson. It revealed the diverse cultural backgrounds of children from all over the world, and yet celebrated their universal similarities. It showed me that a child's life might be lived in many ways, and in many places, each as interesting and important as the others. That there wasn't a single story for how life is lived on this planet. It encouraged empathy, understanding, appreciation, and a curiosity for other ways of life and other cultures. This is the power of storytelling within the context of place. Places are made of 1,000 stories. Every village, every town, every city is different, has its own distinct flavour or rhythm of life. Each has its sorrows and its joys, and has been shaped by the passage of time and history. Writer and author Chimamanda Adichie gives a moving TED Talk on the danger of a single story. She speaks of how so many of us today do have a single story for an entire nation, an entire people, even an entire continent. How this leaves little possibility or room for empathy and understanding or interaction as human equals. The book I read and loved as a child was published back in 1995 with UNICEF. It took the authors 3 full years to gather the materials, to travel the world and to visit each of those 50 children, to make their way, laden with 3 heavy kit bags of expensive camera equipment, from the remote jungles of Brazil to the high Tibetan plateau. Today, nearly 20 years later, and our collective ability to gather and tell stories has changed dramatically. Suddenly, people from every corner of the globe, from every walk of life and many diverse cultural backgrounds, have the tools to capture stories of the world around them, and to share these stories almost instantaneously with a global audience. With a big enough community, stories like those told in my book can now be gathered and distributed to hundreds of thousands of people in a matter of hours or days, not years. There is a whole universe of stories out there, just waiting to be shared. Stories filled with empathy, emotion, and vivid cultural narrative. Stories that can do for entire nations what that book did for me. This is what inspires us at Maptia. This unparalleled opportunity to gather stories from people all over the planet and to create a shared record of our lives and experiences. One that will foster empathy and understanding. A living encyclopedia of stories that we can share with the generations to come. Only now, in this age of hyperconnection and democratized storytelling, are we able to gather our stories together, to make meaning of them, to curate them, and to link them together on a global scale. Our mission at Maptia is to harness this amazing opportunity, to build an open, collaborative storytelling platform that makes it easy and rewarding for anyone, anywhere, to share their stories in a beautiful and compelling format. Every story contributed to Maptia becomes part of a much larger global story that we hope will one day encompass all places and all people. So where are we today? At the end of September last year, along with my 2 co-founders, Johnny and Dean, who are here with me today, we launched the first version of Maptia from our HQ in the little coastal village of Tagazout, Morocco. We'd relocated to Morocco so that we could live frugally and have the time and space to focus on building our platform. True to our traveling roots, we'd also lived in Santiago in Chile and in Seattle in America, where we were fortunate to receive investment from 2 world-class incubator programs. During the past 6 months, Maptia has been in closed beta, and although anyone can read the stories published on our platform, we've been working only with a small and select group of founding storytellers to publish high-quality narratives with beautiful and compelling photography. Developing the tone or meme of an online community, especially one focused on community content creation, is a delicate process at the beginning of its life. We're already working with a number of well-known National Geographic contributors, such as Steve McCurry, who shared his photographs of how education can change the world, and also Simon Norfolk, who will soon be sharing his moving reflections on the various refugee camps he's visited during his career as a documentary photographer. And just as our experiences and lives are so diverse in the real world, so we work hard on Maptia to encourage diversity amongst the stories published on our platform. A wonderful Italian photographer called Gabriele Galimberti also recently published his story on Maptia called Delicatessen with Love, a beautiful tribute to the grandmothers of the world and their culinary talents, starting with his own grandmother here in Italy. And from the inspiring stories of a not-for-profit that has brought clean water to more than 4 million people all over the world, to the thought-provoking story of the last tigers surviving on the Indian subcontinent, we're proud to have started publishing stories that matter, stories that can encourage action where help is needed, and stories that will inspire us to make the most of our time on this planet. The most important measure of our progress and Maptia's impact so far is the total time people have spent reading stories on our platform. Since our launch last September, and despite being in closed beta, over 18 months of collective human time, that's around 800,000 minutes, have been spent reading stories on Maptia, and we've received well over 250,000 visits during that time. In light of our vision to collect and showcase stories from every country in the world, we're especially pleased that our community has already told stories from more than 100 different countries. We know this is a humble beginning, and the world is a big place. But we continue to be inspired by our community and by the positive responses we've received so far. In the coming weeks, we'll be launching Maptia 2.0 and opening it up to the public. Many of the designs you see in my presentation today are a sneak preview of what's to come. One of the core philosophies on which Maptia was founded is that collaborative storytelling can give us a better way to understand the human experience. We think that collaborative storytelling in the digital age is a little bit like adding bricks to a wall. Each of us is given a blank brick to contribute, a canvas, if you will, on which we can be imaginative. We can see that others have already contributed an astounding variety of bricks to the wall, and this inspires us, it gives us ideas. Having the opportunity to contribute to something bigger than ourselves, and yet at the same time create something of personal value, is a powerful motivator. And just like the internet itself, the dimensions of this wall are not predetermined or limited. Its scope is infinite. The wall grows and changes with the contributions of each individual, and all of the bricks are somehow connected to each other. This is our networked world of collaborative storytelling. And what better canvas for these stories than the world itself? Just as man has been telling stories since the dawn of time, so he has been making maps. In the dusty foothills and the wide open prairies, our ancestors scratched temporary markings on the ground and painted symbols on rocks. This mapping reflex is part of our cultural mindset. As a race, we have a compulsion to chart our place in the universe. Maps exist at the intersection of our physical world and our imagination. They tell an incredibly powerful visual narrative. Digital maps are some of our newest and most creative storytelling tools. Reading a story in the context of place can reveal another dimension and give us a richer experience of the story. Often, maps awaken in us a sense of curiosity, challenging our boundaries and our assumptions, fueling our desire to explore the world. And yet, there is still much to be done to transform the practical pin-covered Google Maps that we all know and need into beautiful visual maps that represent a journey or a place in a more emotive way and bring another aspect of the story to life. This is part of our ongoing mission at Maptia, to optimize the process of creating compelling maps for individual narratives and to make them more beautiful. Maps are at the heart of what we're building, and every story on our platform is tagged with multiple locations as the narrative moves from one place to another. Each story becomes part of the meta-story for the place where it is set. Whether it is a continent, a country, or a small village, even a mountaintop, all stories from that place are tagged and organized together. One of the key concepts we founded Maptia on was that where one story ends, another begins. Places are the one thing we all share, and this makes them the perfect canvas for our community of storytellers. Together, we inhabit the Earth's surface, and across the length and breadth of that land and ocean, every chapter of every person's story is played out. The world is the shared stage for our existence. With this in mind, each story on Maptia is accompanied by a unique map, and each story is connected to all other stories with which it shares a common place, for instance, London. This means you can travel onwards from one story straight into another story from the same place, allowing you to explore many different perspectives. In cities, this is particularly fascinating, as it is where we are perhaps at our most concentrated and our most diverse. Our shared geographies bring us together, and within the same few inches of the map, we can see what a remarkable number of different stories are unfolding. In this way, Each individual story published on Maptia is networked by place. It becomes part of a larger web of stories, extending outwards from, say, this neighbourhood, to Milan, to Lombardy, to Italy, to Europe, and finally to the globe. No place has a single story. The interplay of our lives with the landscapes and cityscapes around us are entirely unique. No one can see it through your eyes or experience the world as you do. We each have our own lens on the places we move through. Places are made of 1,000 stories, and it's only through gathering our experiences together that the fluid, ever-changing story of a place may be brought to life. Proust wrote that to see the universe through the eyes of 100 others, to see the 100 other universes they see, was the only true voyage a person could make. Through stories, we are able to do this. We can forget ourselves and step into the shoes of the storyteller. We can feel what they feel, see what they saw, and hear what they heard. We need somewhere to gather the rich memories of human experience, somewhere to record and share our ethnosphere, somewhere that belongs to all of us and to which we can all contribute. Only now, today, in this age of digital and community-driven storytelling, are we even able to imagine that collaborating on something of this scale is possible. Online communities are pushing the boundaries of digital storytelling. Social media platforms have become a vast, instantaneous distribution network, and the tools to capture and publish these stories are more accessible than ever to individuals. At Maptia, we believe in a story, told by people from every corner of the globe, to share with the generations to come. A story of all places and all people. A shared library of human experience, gathered on a beautiful, interactive world map for everyone everywhere to explore. We believe in a story that will continue to grow with each coming day and each new experience added. And in a story that has the power to effect change, as we learn about realities and lives on the other side of the world, and as we gain empathy and feel wonder for that which is so far from our own experience. Most of all, we believe in a story that belongs to all of us, a story of universal truths, of the life that we as humanity, for the briefest but brightest of sparks, play out here on our one tiny, miraculous planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy. Thanks for your inspiring talk. And thank you also for reminding the Chimamanda Adichie warnings about the danger of a single story that leads people to ignorance and stereotype. So, my first question is, I don't know if there are any questions from the audience, just raise your hand. Where does the name Maptia come from?
It's a good question. So we think about maps as having many different layers, many different narratives. And in English, another word for layer, I'm sure as many of you know, is tier, T-I-E-R. And this concept we really loved. We felt tier was a little bit too formal and practical. And so we really just played around with words and came up with this invented word, Maptia. And yeah, that's sort of where it came from. Incidentally, it also means a friendship bracelet in Greek. So we thought the association was only a good one, and we invented the name.
So there are so many different stories from some different places. But I wonder if you can recognize like the pattern, something in common, something that can put together, that brings these stories together.
Yeah, I think amongst, all the narratives we've had contributed to Maptia so far, even when they're told by people who've never met from other sides of the world, thousands of miles away from each other, we found that the topics and the themes within these stories are so often, it could be written by the same person, shared by the same heart, the same feelings that we all share across the planet. And I think that this is one of the the things we hope to bring across and build on Maptia, as we believe that we're all colliding at the speed of light. Communication and the internet is bringing us all together, and it's very important that we all appreciate the diversity and the different cultures, and we see our shared humanity within our stories. So I think the themes really come across, even if they're millions of miles apart, the stories really come together.
Thank you.
Thank you.